Hi there, I'm Kira Woods and delighted to have you with me again today. Today's video I'm going to have a bit of a look at the meaning and symbolism of the Hierophant, which is the number 5 Major Arcana card, and I use the Universal Rider-Waite deck. So I've been looking at all of the Major Arcana, and this is the next one in the series. So the Hierophant. So whenever I get this card in a reading, immediately think of the teacher or someone to bring about some guidance or a mentor and advice. Also can represent sort of the keeper of the sacred, or our traditions, our culture, our society. It could also represent perhaps some cultural impacts or cultural conditioning or doctrines. It may also, depending on how it falls in the spread, indicate something like higher education, which can be either academic or spiritual, or some sort of formal education or initiation. It could also possibly indicate maybe marriage, particularly if the Justice card and the Lovers card are also in the reading, come up in the reading. And of course the question that has been asked. I look at this card and I immediately sort of see the image of somebody who's taken on a position of power or authority. They're looking out over these other small beings. So it's sort of around, it can also represent sort of like our society's desire that, everyone follow the rules, that you get your spiritual guidance from a particular belief system. It can be about, you might see this card come up if you're going to hear about someone perhaps who's had rite of passage or sort of a graduation of type, possibly even a wedding, particularly if they're going to get married in the formal sense, or maybe even possibly a childbirth. Really depends on what else is in the reading. But when I look at this card, I definitely think, of course, about formal religion, the position of how formal church or religions play, and within that there sometimes the sort of the standards they uphold, or the structure around the formal structure or bureaucracy around that, which also can bring up for a person, maybe if depending on how it falls, that a person's become a bit narrow-minded in their approach or a bit too stuck on sticking within the boundaries, that it can also represent something an old-fashioned approach to something. So it could be perhaps, and if your reading is about a relationship, sort of that old-fashioned romance. It could also represent formal training, developing skills or updating skills in a formal sense, doing things by the books, following the mold type of situation. But definitely the card is representing a religious figure, and it is often referred to as the Pope. And so when these cards were made, that was the imagery that was chosen. You might notice that this is the grey stone, and it looks like the figure is blocking the way past the grey stone. It's like they have the answer, they have the knowledge. You get it from them, and or you do not go through past the grey stone. So I look at this in comparison to those of you who maybe have watched the High Priestess card, whereby there was just a simple veil to go behind, and the ability was was by choice. Here it's sort of like, well, this figure is blocking the way to some. It is the imagery that I see. The figure is dressed in rich red robes, and there's a white stripe here to represent, I believe, the position of spirituality or advisory of some sort. They are wearing a 3-tiered papal crown to sort of represent how they are in a position of the highest spiritual teachings. Holding a papal scepter and presiding over, as I said, 2 other smaller figures. The grey in the card, there's quite a lot of grey, sort of represents following teachings or traditions. As I said, in the pillars are sort of blocking the way to wisdom, unlike the High Priestess. And the right hand, they've got raised up in that very traditional imagery of giving a blessing, and the 2 fingers, of course, are pointed up and 2 down to represent, you know, bringing spirit or God or source from the down into the realms of earth, or sort of passing on that. I also can, there's the keys, the crossed keys, which you may notice way down the bottom here, sort of representing perhaps inner and outer knowledge, or inner and outer wisdom. So, you know, this is sort of a card that represents the advisory or the teaching, and the power of being the advisor or the teacher. And then sort of what that means in Orthodox religion can be sort of ruling that, and education, it can be sort of the sense of the higher education and the foundation of traditional beliefs and values. Also can be sort of the dogma or doctrine around that. Very much can be the hierarchy in society and how and where that might fit in the reading. It also could represent a person that's maybe feeling in a position where they of social acceptance or not feeling socially accepted. So the Hierophant here is very much representing the spiritual world, but in a really formal way. You know, it's around that sort of formal, organised and structured approach to spiritual growth or group participation or group identification, which is what we get with sort of the higher education or belonging to a particular religious group or belief. It also can represent maybe your inner counsellor, facing your own ability or psychic connection. So really depends on where it falls on the gain in the reading, but it can sort of be your own inner teacher or guide or advisor. It might be that you're seeking from someone else some sort of knowledge or education or sense of someone else to be your advisor or give you advice. But very much when I think it in a positive way, it's about the balance of the inner and outer, about focusing on our beliefs and our traditions, but not following them blindly, with the sense of awareness of how we have been conditioned or how we follow structure or conformity. You know, it very much can be sort of that trusted teacher or advisor. And for some, this could be their guru or their priest or their rabbi, someone you trust and someone you go to for guidance. Could even be your tax accountant or your attorney or your doctor. It really depends on what position they play in your life and how that works for you. In a positive way, you know, the Hierophant represents sort of that person to give you advice in a non-judgmental way, and to support someone's growth and enlightenment, and help them find their own personal truth, and that is the ultimate. Of course, in formal structured situations, sometimes the structure or the formality can sometimes override that free ability to let someone find their own way. Some of the questions I think of when I see this card is, am I being the teacher or am I looking for a teacher? Am I giving advice or am I seeking advice? Where am I showing my wisdom? Where do I need help? Where do I need structure? Where is structure working for me? Where is it not working for me? You know, when I look at this card, I think it's important not to forget these two smaller figures, and particularly the colours of their robes. It's all we're really focusing on there. And I think of, you might look at this robe here, there are roses, and on this one there happens to be lilies. And so I think of that as the two pathways of learning and understanding. So the first one, the roses, I think of heart and love and compassion and emotion, and how that's all, we use those as a way, as part of our learning. And also our learning is about intellect and logic, so that's what the lilies are symbolizing. Roses can also represent, in some faiths or beliefs, can represent pain and suffering, which here I would say pain and suffering due to us being perhaps too fixed on our thoughts and our intellectual processes. Lilies also represent things like purity and innocence. So I think that it's sort of like putting all of that together. That's part of what understanding, being the teacher or giving advice is all about. So that's what I see when I look at the Hierophant card. What do you see? Please share with me your thoughts and comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if you've enjoyed watching this video, please like the video and or subscribe to my channel so you can find out when I upload other videos. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining me.